Say we open up the meeting. Water Sewer Commissioners, December 28th, 2021.
There are 2 participants in the conference. Please announce yourself.
Stand.
Hey, Frank!
Yes.
Hello, Peter.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I hope everyone had a great Christmas, everybody.
Hi, everyone!
Hi, Pete. How are you?
Peter.
Steve doing good today, Steve. How you doing?
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas!
All right. Let's get the Peter welcome up the agenda. Superintendent's updates. We'll start with that.
Thank you. I've got a few important things to go over. We'll try and keep it as close to the schedule as possible. We have a couple of people coming in tonight. Start off with basic updates. The crew continues to work with the fire suppression companies as we have over the past months. The weather's been cooperating, so we've been trying to get a few more tests done on the sprinkler systems, keep them in compliance. The next round of tests actually start the first week of the new year. We have one test on January 3rd. That's 292 East Main Street, Kelly's Place Restaurant. And the second test, following day, January 4th, is actually at 308 East Main, which is the Bernie and Phil's. That one's a little bit more involved. They actually have some repairs they're doing on the fire suppression system there, so we're going to be taking that system completely offline while they're doing the repairs, liven it back up. They said it could take 5 to 6 hours for the work that they have to perform there. So additional work may be needed that they don't anticipate. But we're going to work with them and get that back online as quickly as possible.
They gonna do a fire watch?
I have not heard if fire is required or not. That's thankfully something that's not coordinated through us.
Yep.
But we will be on site to do anything that they need, from shutting it off in the street to doing a light flushing afterwards once they pressurize the system. We'll jump over to something else we haven't talked about in a while. Is actually PFAS. Based on our system size, we were required by Mass DP to start sampling back in April at all of our well locations. Thankfully, all of our locations have very low detect amounts. Some of them even non-detects. One location, our well 3, has tested routinely above the 10 parts per trillion since we've been doing the monitoring there. And because we were above 10 parts per trillion, but under the 20 parts per trillion action level, we sample there monthly instead of quarterly like we do at some of our other wells with the non-detects or lower detects. Tracking the results, and at the recommendation of Mass DEP, we actually took well 3 offline. Changes happened upstream with some of the other communities who pull from the same aquifer.
So I'm sorry.
Yep.
It's not over 20?
It is not over 20. We have the potential to exceed if we remained on for the quarter. So by taking it offline, letting it relax, letting the aquifer,
Yep. Okay.
do some natural flows, it put us in a bind. We really need the water from that location, based on the limitations that we have at some of our other locations. But Mass DEP, communication with our engineers and everybody else involved, felt we could do it on a trial basis, take it offline, see if there's changes that happen in the aquifer. When we need to put it back on, which we anticipate we will, January or February, then we'll see what the results are there. We've been hovering between the 16 and the 19.5, which obviously is very close to the limit. And the way that they calculate the average there is quarterly. So if you take, you have a high ground within 1 month over that, it's an automatic exceedance. You have to do your public notification. You have to supply a clean or PFAS-free source, or have a plan in place for future remediation and what's going to happen down the road if you have to remain online with that source. A lot of moving parts with that. We chose what we felt was the best option, was to remove it from service temporarily, see if we can get by with the other wells. Again, as you guys well know, we're very tight on water.
Yep.
We're working with the engineers and Mass DEP to get rapid approval for a temporary pump to be installed at two of our recently approved well locations, wells 5A and 6A. I haven't had any updates since before Christmas on the information that was required to submit to DEP on that. I'm sure it's coming, but the holidays obviously slowed it down. With the run times that we had over the weekend, both myself and the primary operator were a little conservative on the numbers. Now, we don't know if that had something to do with the holiday rush, putting a little bit more strain on the system, but by coming offline last week, we actually ran 3 days straight, 24 hours a day, continuous run to meet system demand and replenish a small amount of water in the elevated storage tank. So obviously we can't continue to do that type of operation without some type of impact to the system, whether it be, beating up the remaining wells, pulling a bad sample at one of the sample sites that's not a 4-log site, which would be our well 1 site. There's just multiple negatives that come out of abusing your system. So we feel we can get by for the end of the month. We'll readdress the situation, once, obviously this is a holiday week as well. First week of January, we should see what we hope is the system calm down a little bit, people using a little bit less water, less get-togethers, no parties, stuff like that for the holidays, and see if we can still maintain without well 3 being online. But if we're going to continue in the 22 to 24-hour run times, it's just, you're waiting for a bad thing to happen. I mean, I don't have to explain that to you guys. Everybody sitting here is aware of what's going on. So the potential is that we may have to turn that source back online and deal with whatever ramifications come with the actual sample results from the aquifer. Definitely something we didn't want to be in the situation. Hopefully we can get information from our temporary well supplier, information that he has stuff ready to go. We can do the excavation work, the install work with him, as well as DEP has to approve all of that too. So
if that well comes back online in January and it gets tested and exceeds, what does that do for us? Is the start of a new quarter, kind of reset that whole 3-quarter average thing?
If we sample that, the first quarters go away. It's a brand new quarter, it starts over. If we sample that and we remain lower than the 20 parts per trillion, we can continue to use it into the next month. Again, take another sample. Now you take the average of those two sample results. Again, if it exceeds, you're in violation. If it remains below, you're okay.
By year at that point.
It is.
See what happens.
Yep. I've asked for something similar to what we do whenever we replace a well pump, where we actually have the system offline, flushing to waste. We take a bacteria sample to make sure that the sample is good before putting it online to the distribution system. There's different parameters in place for systems that are online and active as opposed to those that are offline and flushing to waste. So they won't cross-mingle the sample results. Ultimately, what I was trying to do is actually take a PFAS sample and a bacteria sample while offline, flushing to waste, wait for the results. If they're good, turn it back on, no impact. We get the water, maybe we get 2 weeks out of the month, but just something that DEP isn't comfortable with performing the operations that way, as of right now anyway.
I mean, with this keeping up, we really got to watch the hours pumped and consider future hookups. I mean, are we going to be able to support some of these other developments that are coming in?
Yeah, this is a short-term problem. I haven't got there yet, but last week we actually put well 5 and 6 out to construction bid. It went to Combis. It also went into the newspaper. That is a 4-week bid window. Bids will be reviewed and awarded here. Once everything is finalized, the official award will go out. But we're talking mid-January for that. I don't recall the date. Maybe the 18th? So it's a relatively short period of time once we get a contractor on board. As far as the ordering parts, getting everything in place, that's the big unknown. That's why we're kind of pushing for the temporary pump, so that we have.
We spoke about.
Yep, we have the process already in place. They can order. They can take as long as they need for delays, and they can actually focus on the second well, which will probably be 6A at the time, construct that one first. We'd still have our temporary pump in 5A, more than enough water from that one location, and then we'd be able to switch them over, take 5A offline, do the permanent construction there. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of different things going on, a lot of coordination between the engineers, DEP, you guys and myself. And a big thing is cost. It comes down to, does this actually fall in place as an emergency procurement in order to allocate a special amount of funds to be spent, or are we required to go out and get 3 bids, because we exceed a certain $50,000 for the cost? So there's a lot of stuff that's moving around also at the town hall. I've been working with James and the town manager to try and find out what the actual wording would be. DEP has actually mentioned that if you're going to go for emergency procurement, you may want to go for the permanent install instead of a temporary pump. Try and go for one well permanently installed by the same person if they can supply the parts that would be ready for the final installation. Something that I hadn't thought of. I don't know if it's even possible. Haven't had a chance to speak with the engineers too much in depth about it, but it does make sense.
That would be ideal.
What would a ballpark time frame be looking at before this?
That, again, I really don't know. There's a lot of moving parts. It all has to be approved by the town manager and the town accountant to make sure that all the wording and everything would be in place and it would be eligible for emergency procurement. Because obviously they have to, cover themselves up there to make sure everything's done correctly for that. But just some options that are on the table, instead of going for a temporary solution, focus spending the money on the permanent solution, even if it's one out of the 2 locations, and then put the second location out to construction bid. Just
Well, time is of essence. I mean, if they can get the parts, that'd be great.
Right.
That'd be great.
Again, we're doing everything we can to keep us where we need to be, and it seems like we have the right people working with us on this, but COVID is obviously the wrench that nobody ever expected. But yeah, as I mentioned, if for some reason we can't get the temporary pump readily available and installed, ready to go, our demand remains where it is now and our calculations were slightly off, we will have to look at putting 3 back online and potentially take the hit if we do exceed the PFAS level, which would be public notification. Education would have to be presented on the websites and in the public notice that would be handed out or mailed out, I should
But we
say.
still are supplying water that's under the limit of PFAS, so we're still satisfying that portion of what DEP requires.
At the other locations, yes.
At the other locations,
Yep.
that's what I meant.
Yep.
So in other words, what I was trying to get away with, we don't need to get another machine specifically for PFAS, do we?
It's a recommendation that you
Water machine
supply,
you're talking about?
yes.
Yeah, a PFAS specific water machine, yeah.
So other communities that have had an exceedance and don't have the option for additional wells or temporary wells have to provide some type of PFAS-free water to the residents, whether they are focused on one particular area or not, whether it be access to PFAS lower than the 20 parts per trillion at another source, which we don't have those options available. Some other communities have put in basically filtered machines that would filter the drinking water, provide an access point. Some communities have tried bottled water distribution.
Yep.
There's a whole different parameter that goes with that because it has to be certified as PFAS free. Not all drinking water is. And the cost for that, I've heard from other communities has been far more than they expected.
Yep. Yeah, the machines itself alone is triple what we were paying for the manganese machine, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same machine, same look, but a whole different filtration system behind it. So I understand the additional costs that's involved, but again, we're kind of at the mercy of DEP and the EPA with the levels that were set, and how things look moving forward. And then we'll jump over to. Yeah, we still have time. I should be able to get this out before turtle crossing starts.
Okay.
So testing results from November actually show that our system exceeded the standard for the MCL, which is the maximum contaminant level, for TTHM, which is total trihalomethanes. It's a byproduct of chlorination. So the standard is 80 parts per billion. The way that they determine the average is by the number of samples that were collected at each location for the 4 calendar quarters. That level is added and averaged together for the calendar year, which would be 2021. Our level that we actually tested at was 82 parts per billion, just slightly over the 80.
Yep.
So with an automatic exceedance, this does require public notification, education online about, potential hazards of TTHMs found in drinking water.
Yep.
Where was that sample from?
That's actually down Richardson Avenue, which is typically they're found in dead-end water mains, something where you don't see a lot of turnover. So your contact time or your turnover time, is relatively high. The contact time would be the time that the water has with the residual chlorination in the water, and it reacts with any organics or anything, natural minerals that are in there, and it creates TTHMs. So as a short term, what we're going to do, again, water and weather dependent, is increase the flushing. We've typically flushed our dead end mains. I know you guys have heard me speak about it in the past, to improve water quality. By increasing the frequency of the flush, we should also move some of the stagnant water or water that doesn't typically turn over too rapidly, and we should see a decrease in the sample results for THMs at those locations. There's multiple things that go on with the chemistry of the water that can form the THMs. One of them is actually an issue that we've been dealing with, and we requested some assistance with lowering our pH level. I know you guys heard me talk about this before. The issue with the pH level running where we are right now, which is a pH of 8, is the amount of disinfection you have to add to the same water to get the same result. It's almost double or triple running at a pH of 8 as what we were prior at a pH of 7.
Is there any way we can appeal to get that? I know the whole lead and copper rule is gonna come into play, and I understand why we're doing the 8. Understand, but I mean, is there anything we can do, DEP, in regards to lowering that? Because we're cutting up our noses, spite our face to
Right, we're unable to maintain simultaneous compliance running at a level that high, having to put in twice as much or whatever the number is, disinfection to get the same result. So we had compiled all the data that we have from samples taken since the increase happened. Westman Sampson, our engineers, actually worked up. It was a lengthy letter that was sent to DEP for review. I don't even know what I wanted to say. They denied the review. How would we word it?
They were referring back to a 1980s report, and the intent at this point would be, now that the security plan's online, is to revisit it and we can discuss with DEP and for the holidays that they want to have an optimal water quality review, basically, and just go back through and reiterate the numbers that you have right now. And the range that we were hoping for was about 7 to 7.5, and 8 is not what we had recommended before. See how everything goes with the treatment plant. If you need to kind of push it up a little bit, so be it for lead and copper. But our recommendation at the time, 2017, was at least around 7 to 7.5. But they, at that time, issued that to bump it up to that point. So we just need a request to go down.
Yeah, so it's something we've been dealing with for a while. We noticed and we've tracked, unfortunately, increases in customer complaints of dirty water, because that's also another reaction that happens when you have...
That reacts with the manganese, right?
When it reacts with the manganese at a pH of 8, plus with the additional chlorine that you've put in there, so now, you just get the perfect storm that can create issues with your system. As Tara had mentioned, the lead and copper rule is what DEP fell back on from a study from the 80s, which recommended the chlorine, the pH be at a number of 8. So there was, no issues with corrosion in the system. Well, we have never had an issue with our distribution samples for lead and copper. There were issues with another entity in town, not taking proper samples or not following proper procedures. And we were the ones that basically took the hit in order to try and solve that problem. And this information, the information that we sent to Weston and Sampson with the list of all the sample results and the customer complaint log indicate that the change from 7 to 8 actually went in the wrong direction. But to get Mass DEP on board and make a change like that, they're requiring us to do additional rounds of sampling, like Tara had mentioned. We actually have the letter from DEP requesting that we do these rounds of samples. But everything takes time, depending on how many rounds of samples that they want, depending on how long they want us to sample for. And I actually have some questions that I haven't had answers to yet. They are looking for finished water samples. It would make sense to me that you take a raw water sample and a finished water sample, as well as samples in your distribution system, to look at all the different parameters of what's going on with what you have now. And then as you make changes, continue to take the same samples. You'll be able to trend what's going on throughout all the chemical analysis. I'm definitely not a chemical engineer, but from our standpoint, from what we deal with and have dealt with, over the years, it makes perfect sense to have more information than not enough the first time around. So until we see a change or a potential change in lowering the pH, we have to maintain as much compliance with all of our samples as we can. So lowering the chlorine and not lowering the pH, it's a risky measure. We don't want to have public notification for something that is an emergency where this is not. We violated a standard. It requires public notification, but it's not an emergency. If we had something bad happening with the water, that's not a road that we really want to go down. So, we'll work with them. We'll work with our engineers. Actually, it's a requirement that the engineers stamp the sampling plan. That was something that I was reading from DEP, and we'll move forward. But it could take time. Nothing moves quickly. Water samples definitely take time. You want to make sure you don't take them, back to back and miss something that's changed, whether it be temperature changes, different seasonal impacts on the aquifer. I don't have to explain all that, to you. You're well aware of it. The issue with the time is the way that these THMs and HA5s are calculated. So once you have a high number in place, it actually remains in place, and when you do your reporting, the immediate quarter doubles, and then you take your remaining 3 quarters, add them all together, divide by 5, that's your long-running annual average number. So the higher the number that you're dealing with right now is actually going to remain there for quite some time. So you may have lower sample results, but you're never going to cut that number in half each time you take a sample that you can sample out within 1 or 2 reporting periods. So unfortunately, once you see a TTM exceedance, the notices tend to linger a lot longer than the problem. But again, it's a requirement. Public notification will be going out. I have a copy of what is actually going to be going out. This is approved by Mass DEP. You guys wanted to look at that. Clearly states on there, this is not an emergency. There's answers there for what should I do.
One of the emails that you sent us?
This was, yep. That was a draft. This is the final, very similar. There is a link that was provided by Mass DEP that they require to be on there for education, for TTHMs, so people can go to that if necessary. Very similar to the manganese reports that we put out. It's limited to a specific location. Excuse me. And, it's informative is what the goal here is. Mass DEP, EPA, and us want to make sure that the customers are aware of what's going on in the systems, before they read it in the annual Consumer Confidence Report, and they weren't made well aware of it. So,
Were you able to customize that, or was that like a staple?
it was something that was
they
able
come?
to be customized very little. There were key items that are on there that had to be in place, but we went back and forth with Mass DEP with that. I spent a good part of 2 days on it, I think, going back and forth to get the wording the way that they wanted it, have all the information that was in there, and make it fit in a small platform.
Yeah.
So
When does that go out?
We are working with the printer. That's gonna go through a printing company that we use. Most likely, we would see this going out the first week of January. The report, oddly enough, for the fourth quarter is not actually due to DEP till 10 days into January.
Right.
So we have all the information, I've verified all the numbers, I've dealt with DEP, I've sent them electronic copies of it. The hard copies and stuff will be certified and sent off. So we're ahead of schedule with the reporting, just because of the time of year, and the samples are all in. So the notice will be going out as rapidly as possible for that location. So as I mentioned, for an immediate solution, we're going to increase the flushing of the Denham water mains, providing we have water and weather to go along. Long-term goal, we work with Mass DEP and our engineers in an attempt to lower the pH level, which would allow us to use less disinfection product, which is where the THMs originated from, is the increased level of rechlorine in the system. So in the past, basically our numbers have just about held the same as far as for what we're putting into the system. As the water gets cleaner with the iron and manganese removal system that we have, there's more free chlorine. So the changes really should mimic themselves, as the water's getting better in the system. We are doing some light flushing. You're getting water that doesn't have the same level of iron and manganese it did years ago. So it's not eating up the free chlorine. So we've seen that throughout some of our numbers that were steadily increasing. And it only makes sense that, sampling requirements and changes, improvements to the aquifer water that we take, everything should decrease. It's gonna be a staggered decline, I think, is what we're gonna see. They're not gonna have us go and do an immediate jump and drop down too low, which is something we wouldn't want anyway. We'll bring it down, strategically.
Are we getting more metals out of the ground running so much?
We have, the filters have a few more backwashes on them than they have in the past, but the harder you pull, the more you can find.
Right.
Water quality is still amazing, coming from that location. So,
Good.
Once 5A and 6A go online, it'll be wonderful to basically have one location that'll provide us more than all 5 of ours are right now.
Yeah.
Something we never would have thought of. Not to jump off on probably Tara's news, but one of the test wells at well 4, we actually found an incredible pocket. And I think we gained 10 or 11 feet from the existing well, and we were almost not able to get a reading on our vacuum gauge. Now the vacuum gauge is what is used for a drawdown. If you have the average well, you may be at 30, we could get 5. So you've got a pocket that no matter what size well you put there, in that location right now, you'd have almost unlimited source. So water quality samples and stuff will still have to be done, but that's exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah, so we get that from number 1.
It would be great. So, and then to finish off with a little bit more information, not sure if you're aware, UCMR5 is in the works. The numbers that everybody is worried about right now for PFAS 6, they will actually be changing and looking for 29 contaminants
29.
in the PFAS PFOA range. And the additional one that has kind of struck a chord with everybody is actually lithium. And they think that's going to be found with runoff due to solar panels. And the placement of solar panels, unfortunately, is in areas that, are usually close to wetlands.
PFAS wasn't the last thing that we could get rid of that, and something else down the pipe.
So, it's, with Mass DEP and the EPA, it's ever challenging to maintain, the changes that they have in the levels and limits, primary, secondary contaminants. This will be just an additional, unknown, and the biggest thing is going to be the cost. Right now, the PFAS samples are around $300 a piece.
Yep.
Depending on how many samples new communities or existing, municipalities are required to take.
Yeah, we'll get our new sampling schedule coming out, and that's all gonna be predicated on our prior samples.
Yep, so everybody's budgets will be taking a huge hit, for that. We basically fund them, we fund their experimentals you know, with these contaminants and regulatory stuff that they are looking to change down the road. So it's ever difficult, and it doesn't look like it's gonna let up anytime soon, so just something to think about when you see the budget presented and why the increase in the samples is double. But on that good news, I'm sure we have something better from Weston and Sampson or from one of our other people that we have here tonight to present.
Do we get, Turtle Crossing supposed to be here at 6?
They are here.
They are
They're on the
here?
other road. Yeah.
All right, to 6 o'clock, yeah.
Then, we're gonna invite them in and we'll,
Where's Turtle Crossing exactly?
Turtle Crossing is Newland Street, down past Daggett Crandall, on the right-hand side. This is something, Luke might actually remember some of this from many years ago.
you guys,
I'm quietly nodding, I was instructed to be quiet.
you guys, more than likely,
how are you?
if you'd like to use, that,
I think they have
the easel
some
if you want.
printouts for you guys
Okay.
to look at.
Very good.
You know, the board may be far away.
Yeah, it's copies. There's no like electronic pickup, right?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
Well, not that fancy. That's fancy stuff.
Stand right there.
We can share.
Sure. Yeah, I've seen this.
I have,
All three of them that one, if it have a, you can have one facing us. You can use that one, or you have one.
you guys could just, introduce yourselves, to the board when you speak and,
Yep, so I'm Sean Barry from Level Design Group in Plainville. I'm here tonight alongside
My name is Luke Cassiopoulos, I represent Jordan, Charlie Lepard.
My name is Ryan Greer, I'm a developer.
So basically, this project came through about 2017. I was previously approved, and there's, you know, the permit wasn't acted on, so we're back here. The main reason is to discuss the off-site water line and the improvements made to the pump station. And we kind of just wanted to have a conversation with you guys on what your thoughts were, if there's other improvements you want us to make, or where we should go from here.
These are the 2017 plans, correct?
Correct. These are the same ones that were approved.
Right. So, I know I've mentioned to Lou a couple times on the phone that there's been multiple changes, specifically in the sewer down here. That was part of the updates that were gonna be done as part of your proposed property here. The water is pretty straightforward. We still would require the improvements which you guys had proposed, correct me if I'm wrong, it was a 10 or 12 inch that you guys were gonna run down Newland Street?
Yeah, 12 inch.
Yep.
If you flip through page,
One thing that most likely may change, I know you guys had proposed to pick up from Newcomb Street. To facilitate the amount of water going down here. They come into next to the station here. We will move the pipe down the field here. Most likely, just off the top, would be actually to extend this down to a new water main that we're installing down at White Street. I don't know the distance between these two.
like several hundred feet or any guess?
Any idea on that, Tara? I don't, we didn't go down that far with our White Street plans. You know, we could get you that information, but definitely something that we'd want to do moving forward would be to connect. We have a brand new water main that's actually in the design phase now that's going to be installed at the intersection of 123 and Newland Street. So it would make perfect sense to combine this project with our existing project and remove some of the aging pipe that's in that area.
So it is White Street?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, White at Route 123. That would be able to bring that section of pipe into compliance with separation between valves and hydrants. Basically all the way down to your property, or to the entrance to your property. The number right here, provisions in here for connections to the existing roads, Kensington and King. Three-way valve clusters at each location, connecting to the existing roads that are in here that are approved.
Okay.
The water is actually probably the simplest portion of this. Now, as far as the sewer goes, we would definitely have to get our engineers involved. As I mentioned to Lou, there's been multiple changes over the years with additions to the Knollwood station. Originally, that station was designed just to handle that small neighborhood there, Knollwood and the K-section streets. It started off with an addition with Keith Drive, which is a side road off of that right next to the pump station. And then since then, additional connections have been made for the Norton Glen, which is the apartment complex heading down towards the eastern line, 274 East Main Street and Red Mill Village, all pump to that location. So it is just about at max capacity now. I know that there were provisions in this original set of plans to drop in an additional wet well. I believe it might have been an 8 by 20. Which would mimic what's exactly there now. Our concerns would actually be not only the holding capacity of that location, but the discharge capability. The pumps that are there now, I believe, could be increased maybe one size, which would match the discharge pipe size. But the concern would be the actual sewer force main that leaves the station, actually goes back through the K streets, exits out King Road, heading down towards Mansfield onto Mill Street. That would be something that the engineers would have to do calculations on to make sure that it could handle, not only the volume that that station would have holding as capacity, but also be able to eject it quickly enough. Because I know, Lou and I had talked. There's quite a few unknowns with the property here. If we could get some, I don't want to speak to you, Steve, but I think we need some flow calculations.
Yeah, we would need to.
Capacities, anticipated capacities.
Was at the station now, as everything is connected in recent years.
Right. Just to see.
There's certainly improvements to be made at the station, like Frank was saying, that are contained to the site, that can be done, but the station was never sized for what it's currently seen. So the problem being what Frank is getting to is the force main could likely be the limiting factor. You can bring in bigger pumps, make a bigger wet well, but then there's only so much you can push through the existing force main before your velocities become a problem. So that becomes a linear issue. I don't know how long the force main is. That's a whole different animal from working at the site where the pump station is. Now you're talking about, there's not much you can do other than put in a bigger force main. And I don't know, 1,000 feet. I shouldn't even throw a number. I don't know how far it is.
Honestly, I don't recall. I don't know if I've ever honestly looked to see the length.
And
of
I don't know
that.
for sure that it's an issue. I mean, it's a concern, and that's one of the things you run into the more you add stuff to that station. And like I said, you can double the size of the wet well and bring in bigger pumps, but then if you can't push that flow out safely, basically you just blow that force main out.
Right.
So that's kind of what we need to know is what is it seeing now on a regular basis, where we need to be pumping at to handle not only what it's seeing now, but just future flow, plus whatever else is coming out.
Right.
I don't know what else is doing.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if there's anything else in that area. There was some interest in some of the property near the Daggett Crandall home. There's been a few smaller homes on the opposite side of that road, single-family homes that have been tied into this as well. Again, every little bit adds up when you're already very close to the max, or what we consider the max at that location.
So what's the plan on that side? What's gravity on that side? Barry Cole's side?
So that's what I was gonna ask. So there's gravity sewer in Kensington, right? So the force main that currently comes, the multiple force mains that come dump into either this main, or maybe it's this manhole.
It dumps into a gravity manhole at the top of Kensington.
Right.
Yep.
And then is this just an 8-inch line?
I believe it's an 8-inch line going into the the sewer pumping station.
Which we obviously have to look at. True at this point. 'Cause you're talking about, so you're over here, right in this, where is this development coming?
Oh, it's actually pretty far up the road.
Oh, this is Kings, that's
Yeah.
Kingswood, so.
Yeah, it's actually over on, it's on.
I'm sorry, I got one, yes. Yeah, so are you tying into the gravity sewer up at the top? Okay, that's all. But so you're, if I remember correctly, this, so you guys had a pump station in this development, you had to collect all the flow to one location and then pump it up to the gravity sewer, obviously in Newland Street at the top, is that what the wastewater plan was?
What was in there?
Well, if I don't know what the that gravity line is.
Gravity line in the manhole would be the place to keep you concerned about a backup, obviously.
Yeah.
So there's multiple things that need to go on here, just, you know, checking indications of flow, what we have existing, what your proposed flow would be. I know as one of the improvements that I remember reading through, you guys had proposed actually installing an emergency standby generator down here. That's something that we actually already have in the works. So again, you know, there's gonna be some changes going back and forth with, you know, adjustments and fees, things like that.
Understood.
And go from there. And, you guys have any questions? There's a lot to dump on you guys.
No, this is, I remember this.
Okay.
Briefly we went over it. I'm not concerned with the sewer, the water fees.
Seems pretty basic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Get that bottleneck out that, from White Street to be, okay. So we just need some more information for the sewer. So,
Well, how do we, you know, so you'll need a peer review done on this.
How do we do a peer review? Are these going to be the final set of plans? I mean, obviously there's gonna be changes, you know, to what you guys presented. You know, the water main, obviously some of the stuff on the sewer, you know, so we can't obviously, or I should say, I don't want to speak for the board, I would assume the board can't approve a project with plans that are basically inaccurate based on the changes that we have to do. So there's gonna be a little bit of back and forth that's gonna come down. Is the board comfortable with asking the engineers to do a peer review, especially just on our portion, you know, calculate what we have for flows going into.
I thought that was a good idea.
I think that's a start.
That's a,
You know, because then we can get back to these gentlemen with information, you know, we can or we can't, you know, support what you're asking for here, what changes can we make?
I think that's the biggest concern, I'm sure Jim could speak, that's our biggest concern about, if we can support, any kind of, not flow, without question.
Okay. I don't know how you want to handle that, Steve.
Well, it always comes down to how you're gonna pay for it.
Exactly.
And what's gonna happen there, and in some cases, there's already an escrow, the planning board, whatever.
Yeah, I think historically it was recommended, I think Lewis has already stepped out, that, you know, all the peer review payments are directly between the engineers and the company or the developer, to keep us out of the loop. If that's something you guys are comfortable with, that's something the board's comfortable with, we can obviously go that route.
That's what we've done in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Just a lot of changes have happened since this was proposed. Okay. I'm sure you and I can talk about this.
Just open and possible.
And then do you have an engineering firm you want to do the peer review that you're going to recommend to us, or?
We will do it.
That would be our in-house engineer.
Okay.
They would want us to do it.
Okay, great.
And contact directors.
Where do you guys stand with any of the other boards? Did you start here or did you
Well,
go?
they told us to get this, because
Okay.
the first time through, this was only on the tight end.
Okay.
This was the only new end they had when everything went confusing with the casino doing that. So,
Yeah, typically, a lot of people start with us, and it's not uncommon for them to go, you know.
We had, yeah, earlier, like maybe about 7, 8 months ago, I did a group meeting that Paul helped me set up with all the department heads. And they were all there to understand what we were gonna do, and we talked about it then. But then we had to meet, he says, the only part that's still loose there before we go forward is the water and sewer. So then, because of COVID and everything else, 7 more months went by. And, you know, here we are today, that's why it's, nothing else has changed, other than that.
I don't think so. I mean, there'll be some simple plans that'll need to be changed here. The biggest thing is the sewer.
And we'll probably have to do some more drawdown tests or something.
I think so,
At the
yeah.
station, to understand what you have run data, you know, it's flow meter there, but you have.
We have run that,
Yeah.
to show, you know, it's frequent.
No, it's very frequent running. Yeah, it's not a long time to start. They know they have an issue because if the pump goes down there, there's no time to do it. So definitely, the pumps are running pretty much constantly. So we can look at that. Okay, so I'll figure out what we need to do.
You guys have any questions? No questions?
No,
Additional? Okay.
this is our first meeting, have some guidance here, how to proceed.
We appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, no, once we get some information from Steve, I'll proceed and send everything over to you guys, copy on everything. And we'll go from there, get some more work done too.
Great. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, we appreciate it, thank you. Thank you, point.
No, there's a lot of good things that will come from that.
Yep.
You know, the biggest thing is, can we? It's not if we want to.
Frank, you have
Obviously,
contact.
I do have contact information, yeah.
Okay, well, being a little early. Are you from Blue Star?
Yeah, for Blue Star, yeah.
Well, let's just get that going a little early then, if you guys don't mind.
Good evening, Brandon Carr with Supreme Engineering here for Blue Star Phase 2. I think everyone's probably familiar with the site, but so this is Leonard Street here, when you go past the first section of Blue Star Buildings 4 and 5, the Wayfair, and then it kind of turns to the right. This is a proposed Phase 2. We've just received planning board and conservation approval in the past 3-4 weeks or so. We've been working with Frank throughout the process on, kind of the water side of things. But basically, what's proposed as of now is a 200,000. This is Yale Appliances, mainly warehouse. There's some small office component, and there's a really small retail component. And then there's a 60,000 square foot warehouse back here. There's another building, future potential building up here in the 50 to 60,000 square foot range that was shown on the the overall planning from day one, but there's no applications for it yet, or no kind of plans for it yet. We'd have to go through obviously planning and conservation at that point, so we'd have to go through everything. But so the proposal is to drop a road in off of Leonard. It's about 1,600 feet to here to a cul-de-sac. For water, proposing there's a 10-inch existing main in Leonard, and we're proposing to bring a 10-inch main up along that road through the cul-de-sac, and then connect it into, there's a 8-inch main in Janet Street. So basically we bring the 10-inch main to about here, and then the last 400 feet or so would be that 8-inch.
Nice.
So once we get past the 2 building services, we drop to that 8 from that 10 and interconnect into Janet Street. Been working out kind of the details on that.
Yep,
but
absolutely.
there's a hydrant at the end, and basically we just take that hydrant, extend out, and join in, so that we loop it all the way, basically from 123 all the way out to these neighborhoods here. And we're still kind of figuring out some of the mechanics of the exact, but it'll be probably just be a tapping sleeve and valve to that existing 10-inch out in Leonard Street.
Do we need any extra valving in that area? I know
No,
we've done some work out there on some culverts.
Part of phase one, when they did some of the culvert works there, they actually worked in a few valves.
Okay.
When they replaced a few sections of ductile iron pipe, anywhere there was gonna be a culvert. There's actually, that main out there is actually cast iron, but it's in good shape, it's lined.
Okay.
We were concerned with the separation between the cast iron pipe and the culverts that were put in place.
Right.
So just out of the precaution, we required them to replace it with ductile anywhere that there was gonna have a culvert over the pipe, just in case there was any settling that went on.
Yep.
The ductile could obviously take that, the cast iron most likely would frown upon it.
Yep.
So that was taken and done as part of phase one. We've worked with Brandon and Dupree Engineering, coming up with hydrant locations along with the fire department.
That's
They had some
my next
concerns.
question. With removing that
Yeah.
one, we want to make sure that they have adequate
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that-
fire protection for that development.
Yeah, so we're not removing this one, all we're doing is swinging it to the side, so
Oh, I
it'll
thought
come
you
off
were
as a
gonna-
T.
Okay.
And then
So-
there'll be a hydrant here, a hydrant at this entrance, there's a hydrant up near this building, and then we're proposing 2 every 500 feet.
Okay,
out to
perfect.
Leonard.
No, I was just really more concerned
Yeah,
with,
so that hydrant is remaining.
I thought you said you were removing it.
Yeah,
but you're just-
they're
you're
gonna remove it
just-
to connect,
You're
but-
teeing it off and you're
Yeah.
gonna put it up. Okay, I understand.
Is
Yeah.
the road gonna go through as well, or is it gonna stop?
There's
at
just
the cul-de-sac?
there's a gated emergency access for
Okay.
fire requested back there, so that water main would be in that, it wouldn't be like through the woods or anything, it's
Right,
right in that
okay.
access road.
Okay, great. That's a great loop.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty cut and dry, pretty simple. We've
Yep.
been working with these
Yeah.
guys, quite a bit. There was some disconnect originally. Phase one was done, if I remember correctly, by a separate engineering firm.
Yes, yep.
So there was a gray shaded area at Leonard Street where it first connects down to the lower section that didn't have any information.
That's the
there.
big field there, right? Is that
That
what
is,
that
yeah,
is?
right on the
okay,
sharp turn.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. So that's something that Brandon has worked out, and that's why he's talking about the
Okay.
tap and sleeve and valve that'll be going in there. Because it was a small disconnect, obviously, of how you're gonna get from A to B.
Sure.
It was on the original set of plans, different engineer.
Excellent.
So the connections will be there. Three-way valves at all the intersections that are going to the parking lots where you're gonna have the additional hydrants going off to the sides of the
Okay.
buildings. So fire is happy with the plans. They'll have, basically hydrants at, I don't even wanna say what the letters are, they change it, but A and B would cover, so they have front and back coverage,
Okay.
from additional laterals that are there.
All right.
Pretty basic. The loop is a big deal for us.
Yeah, for sure.
Something that we had talked about with them way
That was
back
nice
when,
to,
before
nice to
phase
hear you
one.
say that before
Yeah.
we asked.
Yeah, I mean, the loop's great for, both sides, and, these aren't huge water users, so,
Yeah.
but it is, we figured we'd bring in the 10-inch just because that's what's in Leonard, so,
Right.
these are mostly warehouse, so there's really not huge flows back here, but, potentially someday, maybe somebody else takes
Right.
over, and so it's there, but,
Excellent.
so that's basically it.
Yeah, each building has their own 8-inch fire line and 2-inch domestic proposed to it. So it'll be obviously covered under the fire watch with the sprinkler process.
Are they stubbing off for the potential,
That hasn't even been talked about
You know what,
yet.
I was just thinking that
Yeah.
myself too, and I'm thinking that they wanna get out there and start construction probably in the spring, so, I'll have to ask them, if
stub it to the property?
might as well
makes
stub
sense
it
to
while
do
we're
that.
there, while they're building the road, so, I was just thinking that myself when I was talking about it.
Yeah. The original phase one plans indicated 3 buildings there, and I know things have changed, over the time of the build, but, yeah, I mean, it may actually be in everybody's interest at that T location, if there is gonna be a stub, to actually place a hydrant on the end of it.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think there's a hydrant right before this pond, basically where that building would be, so I'm wondering if we just bring an 8-inch lateral out to that hydrant, leave the hydrant, and then in the future, if they wanna use that for their service, they just swing the hydrant.
Basically do what you're doing on Janet
Exactly,
Street.
yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'll, see what they have, if they have any concrete plans or what the concept is, we'll just line up that hydrant in a good spot for the
Great.
future.
Perfect.
So, yeah, that's it.
All right.
Cut and dry.
Now,
Yeah.
what about the sewer from this building? Like,
So-
is it gonna be, I know that there's a flow, was it a flow meter or something? I can't remember what building it's at, but,
40, building 7.
yeah, so
This,
how,
is this sewer on Leonard? I'm sorry, John.
It's
So-
private.
private sewer?
Yeah, so there's
Okay, okay.
there's, so it's kinda, there's a small pump station here for this building, small pump station here for this half of this building. The gravity sewer is being brought in up this road to about this point.
Okay.
So they'll all tie in gravity-wise and the 2 pumps into that. It'll gravity back to here, and then there's another private pump station going here that'll pump to the one up near between building 5 and
I know.
past 7.
Probably, I mean, I can't speak for MFN, but I know they're probably gonna want some other type of flow meter to measure that.
Right, there was some difficulties with one of the other flow meters in one of the other buildings there in phase 1 with inaccuracies. I'm not sure if it's brand related.
Okay.
But
It did get straightened out.
It was,
but
originally, yeah.
Yeah, I'll make sure that they're
something
using whatever the,
I know, like
the right one was.
Mansfield wanted to meet us down there like once a month or something to get. I mean, I don't really know why we needed to do it because we're billing them off of water usage anyway, but it had
Yeah, I was
something to
just
do
wondering.
with. I'm not exactly. I don't remember the particulars, but that's something they're probably gonna want.
Yeah, the MFN is very concerned with the accurate flows going, from multiple buildings now going to another pump station.
Yep.
So that they would control if there's any I&I coming in, from a line that may be connected.
They know about it, okay.
By accident. They also have a wastewater coordinator down at the MFN that would want to know about any manufacturing or anything that's done here. I believe there's one other company in phase 1 that does pallet washing.
Yep.
So just, I'm sure they'll be in contact with you guys,
Okay.
depending on who your occupant is here and what type of work they're gonna do. But just small things to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Alright. I don't have any more questions, Jim?
No.
Alright. Very good. I like it.
Thanks.
I like the quickies. Thank you very much.
Very simple.
All right. Who wants to go first? Tara? No, I want to beat up Tara a little bit. So, Steve.
Thanks, Brandon. Have a good night. That's fine. Don't worry about it.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Generator at Cobb Street, estimated delivery is at least 12 months.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
You serious?
Right
Oh, yeah.
now,
I was
that's
expecting
the best number
24.
we have. And that's optimistic that they'll have it in by the end of 2022. They're hoping to have it in by the end of 2022.
Oh my God.
Fortunately, you do have one there that is working.
No, I know, but I mean,
You're being proactive. But yeah, that's
I know we're covered. I get that, but
Right.
it's just
this is what we're up against.
kind of disheartening.
Yeah, it is. But it's pretty standard.
Unfortunately,
Not that they're
you're
not
accurate
trying,
with
but
that.
that's what's there. That's what we're up against. So, not much is gonna happen out there for a while now. We're
Mhm.
kind of just in that wait mode. So, it is what it is, it's not costing you extra money, it's just time right now. Nobody's out there spinning their wheels with this.
No, we will have to grant an extension to the contract based on these, which we expected,
Yep,
but just
yep.
so it's
Yeah, we
verbalized.
do, I mean, it's, yeah.
What sucks is it pushes everything out. Anything that's on the list, or everything's getting pushed out, and they're gonna get pushed out more, and
Unfortunately, you're exactly correct. Unfortunately, we see that, we knew this was gonna happen with generators here. Similar situation will probably happen with the other 2 smaller generators that, we were talking about for Holly and Norwood pump station.
Based on the size, you might have more luck with Holly.
Right, being smaller.
Being smaller.
Mhm.
Norwood's pretty reasonable size, but we'll have to see.
Mhm.
But you still gotta get to the point where you've ordered it. We're not there yet. We haven't done the design and size.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've heard anything on that contract that didn't come back from town hall.
No.
I sent out a request about it. Never heard anything back, but we're gonna be having a meeting with
We're doing
town
it this
manager
week.
tomorrow, so try to
Mhm.
freshen them up about that.
Hopefully it wasn't lost in the shuffle of paperwork.
Yeah,
out
well.
there. If that's the case, it's a easy fix for us. A couple printed, a couple signatures and get them a new copy.
Yeah. That's fine. And then we do, so we've still got the town hall complex.
Is there any leeway on that?
Discussions, they're just looking for ideas.
Yeah.
They're looking for ideas. I told them I'd get back to them after the first of the year with at least a scope, which we'll probably before I even get into a heavy scope and spin our wheels on options that aren't viable. Figure that out. I know now they're talking about this one stop for funding that they'd like to take advantage of. So we need to, I guess, meet with them and talk about what the options are.
Okay.
Yeah, we've spoken behind the scenes about what we feel is best from our point of view. What would benefit, by going down certain avenues instead of going to other ways. It all comes down to cost. This isn't a sewer department project or a water department project. It's a town municipal center. So they would have to agree to everything that's there. Obviously, using Weston and Sampson as engineers, as they are right now, and follow recommendations from us. But it would be a benefit in the long run. So I'm sure we can work with them wherever we can. But as I mentioned, and John and I had talked about this, the sewer department really doesn't have the budget in place right now with the last project that went on to take on any type of huge expense, with the limited customers that we have and changes that we've seen in the tie-in connections.
Yep.
So we do everything we can. We want to work together, and we want a long-term goal is obviously to get as many sewer customers, as possible. But there are some limitations there.
Okay.
I think that's it.
All right, Tara. We're ready.
Well, Frank set the stage, so some exciting things going on the water side. But we're working with with DEP and with the water department on just setting up the preparations for the PFAS. We've been having discussions with Mass DEP, and I don't foresee any issues with them approving a temporary pump. We just need to kind of work out basically functionality on the pounds and the things. And there's some concerns about having too big of a pump in there and having too much water, and with the winter time not having enough turnover. However, weather conditions are reasonable. If there is going to be flushing, that could possibly counter. So I think that's what we just need to kind of talk out. Options on this end of, if we do put the temporary pump in at 700 gallons a minute, what flow rates are really going to be adequate, and how does it operate? How are they going to actually modify that and adjust it without doing a full construction? I mean, what's out the bid right now, we're going to have bids come in on the 18th. That is for a full below ground vault. Basically, the pitless adapter goes in onto the existing wells. Then send the piping through a metered vault, and that's where we're going to be basically tying in and bringing electrical conduits back and forth, signaling, as well as water quality samples that go back to the existing station. So we did leave under the treatment plant project as an additional add-on. We stuck T's in the ground for both locations, for wells 5 and 6 for future replacement. They do have caps on the end of the T's with gate valves, so they're accessible. We could do something temporarily. I think it's just at this point just discussing with their primary operator, making sure that everyone's comfortable with what process would need to occur. The pricing that we got from our driller is not very significant. Setting up the rental of the existing pump and installation, roughly about $5,000 plus $1,000 roughly per month to rent. So we're well below the $50,000 on that level. The concern would be actually what we need to do as far as electrical and instrumentation now. So that would be independent and obviously hiring the town's current instrumentation and controls, as well as a third-party electrical.
But that wouldn't count towards the $50,000.
No, and we have an existing contract with our current driller, and I'm not concerned about that. And overall, you would be below the $50,000 for those. That would be more expensive for that. But I think the biggest concern right now is just making sure the operational functionality and timing. So if this continues with this 24/7 operations, which I do agree probably is people coming home for the holidays, having an additional number of people living in and/or staying in homes and parties and whatnot. So it probably will slow down a little bit, but again, we just want to make sure that we have enough flow. And if you do want to start to flush because of the sewage change as well, this would be an opportunity. It's a possibility to just kind of have that pump there. I think we want to set that up and get it approved with DEP, and you have that in your back pocket if you need it. So we have the well 3 situation, and as Frank mentioned, it is offline. At this point, you're below the PFAS levels, you're not in an exceedance. The concern is that as it creeps up, you could be. So the thought was to kind of give it a rest, see how the current usage was, see if you can run off the existing sources as we previously discussed. If need be, you fall back on that if you have to. The other option is to go with the temporary pump too. So we will need heat blankets. We will need to make sure we're protecting that area as well. If we did set up a temporary pump, temporary staging area, kind of temporary fencing, make sure it's protected from passers-by and whatnot. But so that's kind of where we're at with the setup. I do foresee, potential concerns with delivery and expenses, with whether it be an emergency setup situation or if we go out to bid. So if anything has told us this COVID situation, there is nothing available and everything, just duct line pipe is something that's on that order. So there are some concerns that we have with just getting delivery of components at this point for any project that we go out with. And then certainly the stimulus is not going to help any of that. There's going to be a lot of infrastructure improvements that are going to be taken in the near future across the country, across the world. So we'll play by ear, see how it goes, but I think we just need to do a little bit more chatting back and forth to make sure we're all on the same page. But I in discussions with DEP, they just need a letter notification from us. We already do have approval to construct. We have approval of the new source. So there's no issues on that. It's just kind of an interim operations, basically, before you get the permanent solution online.
So do we have a letter to DEP, or have we had correspondence with DEP for the temp setup now?
We're going to put that together. I did receive at the end of last week the information from the driller with the exact pump information that I would need to put a letter together. So that would be our next step, is this week to submit something in. Concurrently, just double check and make sure we get it in writing. One from us for well 3 activation. Q1, which is basically January, February, March of next year, now that it's been offline for a few weeks, what do they want to see? Period, obviously, before we put it back in service, but typically they would want to see when the water is pumping into the system what the PFAS results are. So, and then you go on your running month, quarterly average for that, and if you're above 20, then you're in exceedance. So, you'll see where it is, but as we said, right now you're not, and you're below 20, and, we'll kind of play it by ear once we get to that point. If you need to put the well online, you put the well online, and then get the results back, and if you need to make notifications, then you'll follow all proper procedures to get that out, so. Are there any questions? I know we kind of talked a lot about that in Frank's update on well 3 as well as the wells 5A and 6A.
No, just kind of a sense of urgency. That's all with me. Just knowing that this time of year, running that many hours is just that's a lot.
Yeah.
And I understand you're gonna get higher output with people home and everything like that, but 24 hours this time of year, that's outside watering hours.
Yeah.
That's what scares me with newer things coming into town, and we're going to be able to support. I know we have good things down the line. I get that. I'm just worried about now. That's why expediting things is like critical.
Especially at this past weekend, we have no schools, we have no Wheaton College in session, so that's stuff to consider. I mean, that's.
Right. It could be our average number once everything comes back, outside of the holiday time.
Yeah, you have that holiday rush, but then you're getting several thousand students back in town showering and.
So hopefully, Jim's pretty good to deal with it at DEP.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so much on his plate anyways, but he's usually he has been good with us with everything, with the whole plant and everything.
Yep.
So hopefully we can get that. Okay.
And we've been in discussions with them as well, with the pH as well, and that's something that we've been discussing. Lowering the pH has been on the plate for a while now.
Yeah.
It's come to a head at this point.
That'll be a harder bill to pass, as it were. They're gonna.
I mean, you're gonna already need to be with the new sources online. You're gonna already need to be sampling, doing additional sampling that you would normally do for the new source. So it's an opportune time now to kind of do that too. So your lead and copper samples will be taken as needed. But we don't foresee any issues with that at all. I mean, there shouldn't be any concerns with volume of pH. So I think it's one of those, just we need to dot our i's, cross our t's, get the paperwork in, provide the original 2017 documents as well as the future sampling. And I agree, take some raw, get some finished. If it's not in that letter that we just received,
It's not, yeah.
it would be, it should be, so.
It's in everybody's benefit, I think, to do some additional samples, prior to changes, and continue to do the same samples once you make your alterations, just to verify what's going on in the system. The THMs and the HA5s are taken at two of the furthest in the system, so they have the longest residence time. And there's also two that are taken close to the water treatment facility, because that was the closest proximity to our three largest wells, 4, 5, and 6. And we've seen an increase in actually all of the sample sites. So that again indicates it's not just primarily located at the dead-end mains where you typically find increases in THMs from residence time being long, but it's throughout the entire system. So that was the only location that exceeded, but it doesn't mean it's going to be the only one. So it leads back to, a change that's going to be required now that obviously the water's becoming cleaner. It's time to lower the chlorine, but we can't do that until we take additional steps prior.
Right.
So it's, like I said, it's a stratified step down to make sure we go in the right direction and not go too rapidly.
We'll establish a baseline and have that as, information. We have the historical data as well, from years past. And the whole goal, in the wintertime, you typically would lower your chlorine dosage anyway, just based on the weather and not having to keep it hot, like the heat and whatnot. So you have less concerns with the bacteria growth in the wintertime anyway. So that's all in the works in the next week or so, and I think we just want to make sure we get everything out there, and then you have all your options on the table, and you can choose if you want to go with what you want to do. And then we'll have the bid opening on January 18th, and you'll see what the pricing is. We have right now the hope is that the special projects with the stimulus funding, you'll receive money for that, and especially hopefully will make up for any increases in costs, which we would anticipate due to the.
Is there any additional grants out there at all that we could benefit from, that you're seeing, or might be possible?
As far as the infrastructure bill, there's right now, what we're having a meeting tomorrow actually about is discussing with the town manager exactly what the initial county funds for the ARPA funding that you actually have and how we distribute that. To make sure whether it's 1 million, 3 million, it's a little unclear on exactly how much there are potential additional funds. What is coming through as far as the infrastructure bill will be going through the DEP SRF program. And that'll be typically is, for non-PFAS related projects and likely non-lead and copper related projects would be an application typically every once a year. It could change, we'll see how DEP rolls it out, but right now we have folks that have already applied for projects in August of 2021 that are already going to be on the docket, and then those that already are exceeding PFAS right now, above 20, those communities will be priorities number one for certainly any infrastructure monies that would go towards PFAS or emergency management. So there is certainly some potential there. And the bill was just signed, so it's rolling out. So that's part of our discussion tomorrow, is just to discuss what documents and what kind of paperwork needs to be in place, what the town manager has heard and what we've heard, and where we want to make sure we just have everything lined up. We have a list of projects that we have ready to go. We just need to know which ones, how much money they're looking for, what the sweet spot is as far as the town manager's concerned right now. And then future projects, if anything else rolls out, we've got a couple projects that are more related to potentially eliminating some lead use nets in the system and other things. But, we have it set up that, depending on where it is, if the special project doesn't come through, funding well 4 would be the priority at that point. And that kind of gets me into the wells 1 and 4, I guess, if you want to segue into that right now. So as Frank said, the theoretical yield looks really good for what we've seen so far. Again, water quality will be.
Where is this?
Well, 4.
At 4, okay.
Yeah, water quality samples taken, so we just need to wait for those results to come back. However, you do have the treatment plant, which all the water will be going through. So assuming that you're roughly within the typical parameters that we've seen at 4, 5, and 6 in the past, then there shouldn't be any major issues with that. It is right nearby, so we're not anticipating anything crazy, but So good news on that. Well, one, I didn't get an update, and I don't know if they've actually started to do it.
I don't know if they did.
Yeah, folks have been taking a couple days here for the holidays, so hoping to get a little bit of an update by the end of this week, or if not, right after the new year. So get some updates on that at least, but that is obviously in the works, so we'll have some information. And depending on, again, the funding and where it gets stratified here, if we do find a viable solution for one, and funding for 4, 5, and 6 is actually covered under the ARPA funding, then, we would move forward with well 1 as a replacement well, if that was viable. And then the next option is really going to, water main improvements and or tank improvements, water storage tank improvements. I think as far as, we talked a little bit about White Street, that's in the works. I just got some additional information to put onto the plans, but it sounds like maybe with the turtle crossing, it's about a half a mile, I think, from the Red Mill Road to Newland and White.
Good guesstimate, yeah.
So if that's an option that you might want to consider, if that water main, if that's a need of improvements. They'll have a nice new water main going up Main Street.
Yep.
We're going to basically eliminate the water main on White Street, and we're just coming down straight down Newland, connecting in with Main Street, and then running along Main Street, and doing the tie-in for the Red Mill.
Red Mill Village, yeah.
I think that's pretty much it on the updates on projects,
Okay.
current projects that are on.
All right, good, thanks. All right, you have any other news or old news?
I don't think so. Did you gentlemen approve the minutes?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
We're gonna get some new dates. Take a look at next year's schedule. Next year already. So, we got the 11 and 25. Is that what we usually do, the second?
Second and fourth.
11. $5:30 still.
11, what was that, sorry?
The 11th and the 25th.
Very good. 5:30 works for me.
5:30 still work for everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Well,
What was the date of the minutes we approved?
Oh. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah,
Okay.
please.
I move to approve the minutes of the December 14th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. All right. Jim? Your favorite?
Coyotes?
A couple of them. We've got a good pack that lives
I'm
here.
hearing all
What
kinds
is
of
it?
animals go crazy today.
That's coyotes? Yeah.
Wow.
They're excited the meeting's over.
Maybe we should
Wow,
adjourn.
holy smokes.
Maybe it's not time to adjourn.
Maybe we-
Everybody got a stick to bring
They
outside?
have something to say.
Oh my goodness. Well, all right, we got our new dates and
All right, then.
your motion.
I move to adjourn our meeting.
I second it. All in favor?
All right.
All right. Have a happy new year, everybody.
Yep, thank you, everybody.